Yume Nikki was an amazing RPG Maker game that has been touted as a pinnacle piece for indie video games since the early 2000s. I may gush about that game someday, but there have been many long essay videos on the game already. But what fewer people talk about is Yume Nikki Dream Diary. Yeah, so Yume Nikki is Japanese for Dream Diary, so the spiritual remake being named Yume Nikki Dream Diary is a bit weird. Before we get to the actual game, well, what is it? This game was made with oversight from the original creator named Kikiyama. The game is kind of a stripped down version of the original 2004 game. Being made in 2018 by a different game studio, it is, very different. So these games are very different in that the original is kind of an open world experience, while Dream Diary is more focused on a linear puzzle-solving experience. For right now, we're going to table this question and get into the game so that we can dissect it in a more effective way. Yume Nikki Dream Diary starts with our main character coming out of a convenience store. We walk out and stroll through the park, drifting down the sidewalk, but then we have a strange feeling as we come upon a red puddle on the ground next to an apartment complex. As Metatsuki looks down, a black shadow appears. When she looks up, another girl is falling towards her. After a cut to black, we wake up, startled in our bedroom. With that, we're in the world of Yume Nikki Dream Diary. First off, my immediate note, why does this game look so nice, but Metatsuki looks like this? Also, I only noticed this when going back through the footage. The falling girl looks more like a predator missile more than a person actually falling, since, at least from what I see, she's not even animated, just falling straight down. It's only a split-second moment, but so funny to me. The title flashing on screen is also a very nice visual. Unlike Yume Nikki, the Dream Diary in this game works more as a progression system than a save system like it was there. We also have Super Nasu, a reference to Nasu, which was a minigame you could play in the bedroom in the original game. You still can't leave your apartment, and you still fall asleep to enter the dream world. This game is also unique in its odd movement system. This game is a mixture of a platformer and 2.5D open world game. The core gameplay is similar to the original, where you need to go through the dream worlds to gather all the effects to get the ending. We have far less effects in this game and less areas to explore, but this is counterbalanced by giving us new experiences and also new goals. It's far more linear by having the player follow a kinda set path. We need to use multiple objects and effects from each area, but ping-ponging between them isn't very easy, especially for comprehension, so we'll go area by area and explain the effects when we need them. But let's go through our first door. Our first door to the right is a linear side-scrolling level. The dark streets and alleys line our perspective. If you walk to the left, you can find a red being that looks like a floating jellyfish and free it? That'll be a little important later. As we walk more to the right, we can see all of the shops closed with their metal sheets down. There's no people, just shadows that Metatsuki sees passing by. Walking to the next load zone, we see arms protruding from an alleyway as it sends out rolling eyeballs to attack us. Going further, we can see small shadowy figures that turn to look at us, and if they do, their red penetrating stare can kill Metatsuki. A shrine has multiple eyes hide behind it, and we can find concept art at the foot of it. We're going to look at it more later, but the concept art is kind of like the progression visual of this game, because it's the only thing that is definitively counted as a percentage for completion. Going farther, we can find more eyeballs, shadowy figures, and even giant hands that smash onto the ground trying to catch us from the darkness. After getting past them, we get a cutscene with these little purple, bug-eyed creatures running away as tall, thin, black figure rises from the ground and starts destroying all the lights. Because of course the villain of the game is a black guy at night. After running past all of the cloaked figures and away from Jerome, we can see all the purple creatures run out of the alley, followed by a tsunami of eyeballs. As we run from the avalanche of orbs, we can see luminous figures in the sky as we avoid obstacles in the way like roadblocks and traffic cones. We can escape the eyeballs by running into a pair of double doors that lead to a butcher's room. Before we move forward though, there's a small side area within the alleys I want to mention before moving on. In the alleys, there is an open manhole cover where you can run into a sewer system with these odd, pale creatures with giant holes for faces. They sulk through the water as they blindly walk with no face. The sewer also leads to other areas by using ladders and tunnels. It's actually pretty nice and reminiscent of the other area from Yume Nikki that looks the same. It's not that impactful, but I mean, it does serve as a bridge between two different areas that can be convenient, but just not really used that much. Going back to the butcher's, we can take the knife out of a carcass and enter the next room to see the gluttonous creature. He's guarding the door, so we need to figure out how to distract him. Luckily, we can use this computer on top to turn on the meat rotators. So this is supposed to be a clever puzzle, but I genuinely didn't know why 351 is the right answer. The two levers on the console either add or subtract from the number on screen, and the red button enters it as your answer. According to the wiki, 351 can be seen in faded text on the fridge in the slaughter room, but I didn't notice it. And looking back, it looks more like 951 to me, but I mean, I could just be blind. The name of the creature on the right, according to the fan wiki, is Henki Shita, which he does look like a pretty big Shita. It looks freakish and weird, but that does actually play to its strengths as a creepy carnivorous monster. Going through the doors, we end up outside near garbage cans and can walk out onto a rainy road. Narrow eyes boring down on us. After hitting the end of the road, we find what looks like a creature in a straitjacket, surrounded by traffic cones. There's no way around it, so we slash at it with our knife. It cries in pain, but we continue until a flash of white light. As we come back, pans back to show Matatsuki standing over the bloody corpse of a person. This is effectively the end of this area. But I want to point out some of the things from this last section. First, and in my opinion most important, the eyes and creature we kill. First off, this whole area had a lot of eyes. I'll talk about it later in my closing thoughts and theories, but in this last section, the eyes would watch Matatsuki and then look away as we went farther right, as if trying to ignore or purposely evade eye contact with their mouths open, as if gossiping behind Matatsuki's back. Another thing is the kill of Onsen-san, the creature that turns into Shitai-san. I am using these names based off the Yume Nikki wiki and hope they are right, but taking these two characters that seemed kind of unrelated in the original game makes an interesting little connection. And for those of you who do not know, the term Matatsuki is from the original game of Yume Nikki, where she was one of the few characters to have an official name of her character. Matatsuki, from what I've found, has two possible translations in Japanese, one being windowed, or to have a window, and the other being aperture, similar to the aperture of a camera, which we can see through. That's not exactly related to this game specifically, but more so to Yume Nikki as a concept for those who don't know. However, without further ado, let's move on to the next area, the desert. Matatsuki appears slouched next to a monument in front of a temple with a frowny face as she gets up. There's a vine right next to it that way you can use the knife to get an eye from. The barren surroundings look kind of like that old Star Wars set of Tatooine. I don't know why that's so specific to me, though, but whatever. There's even a picnic spot on the left side of the screen and multiple podiums in front of the large temple. On this last picnic spot is a liminal, never-ending section. Yeah, one of those, how fun. It was really annoying to traverse, and you need to do it to get more stuff. The next interesting part of this area is the boxcars. The left side of this map has a boxcar that we can enter and even take a seat in. It's oddly serene for such a cramped and dark train car. Trying to leave, we end up in a completely new spot. A patch of desert with a chain-link fence surrounding small stone houses. The area is devoid of life, except for the giant bouncing creature. To capture it, you can use some bait and a giant cage in the middle of the town. After trapping it, the town becomes, well, not lively per se, but things start to inhabit it. The people from the sewer come back, the ones with holes for faces, and you can interact with them to get different items or glyphs, which can help you progress into getting all the glyphs required to open the giant temple. I won't painstakingly mention every item, but if you want to walk through if you're stuck, I'll link down a 100% run that helped me when I was stuck multiple times. probably mostly my fault. You can also go back to the alleys at this time through the sewer and also find the butcher room, into which we can find another odd bed area? I'm gonna be honest, it really confused me, especially with how you needed to follow the auditory clues of the child's laughter to somehow trap them. It was really weird following the tutorial of this too, because of how the girl moved and how you never really get to see her until you've cornered her and she went into a random direction. However, once you complete that, you can find her in this separate room where she grows another hand and looks like, well, this. The blue flames around her give a menacing aura, and we need to run through a maze of beds. I will say, I'm glad that the maze of beds gives you a checkpoint when you may be likely to die here. But the beds being telepathically moved so slowly while running through can actually inadvertently remove the suspense they're supposed to add. You're just sitting there for 4 seconds watching the thing run at you, and then eventually the bed moves and you easily outrun it super fast. This could have easily been balanced better in my opinion, but that's about all that it offers. There is also another area accessible by train into a wooded area that I believe is supposed to mimic one of the forest areas from the original game. But checking the wiki, it says it's based off of the graffiti world, which looks like this? I don't see the resemblance, but okay. Back on track, we can find this creature that coughs up a glyph using blood. We've been collecting glyphs all for one purpose throughout the desert, and that is to get back to the first area to open the ancient Aztec-looking temple gate. Going up the steps, we can find this odd, dreamy area with the umbrella effect that gives us a double jump, floating ability, and ability to make it rain anywhere. This area is also just beautiful. It has glowing people watching things move in the night sky. Although that is a low-res background image with a lot of kind of out-of-place environmental pieces around. Things just don't mesh all that well, but I think that some of it does still look nice. The next section of glowing white flowers is truly a pretty sight though. Once touching them, we go back to our bed. This area was so-so to me. It's very linked with other areas, which does make it interesting, but also gives it a varied feel, especially with the TARDIS train cars. I think the environments were quite hit or miss in my opinion, but I feel like this has been my feeling for a lot of this game so far. The creature designs and links from the original game are mostly alright in my opinion, but sometimes a bit questionable. I still like it, but it's not first place. I'm still on the fence when I look at some of these 3D designs. I mean, some of the monsters definitely benefit from it, but overall these areas are kind of okay at best. They look nice at first, but the longer you explore them or stay in them, you can notice a lot of overuse of one thing or issues that start to set off the rest of the area. Speaking of, the docks are another neat looking area that follows a 2D platformer aesthetic. I'm not sure how I feel with this segment pretty much being a puzzle platformer, especially with how basic the puzzles are with the enemies. It uses these weird creatures, Toringen, I think? I mean, the animations and designs are fine. I actually quite like their adaptation, but the level itself is just so oddly bland. You have these planks and docks that look a bit over-realistic with Unreal Engine water, and then these odd rocky coral in the back that don't look very good. The level is kind of serene in a way, but still ultimately quite bland. Some things just don't feel like they belong with each other. But there's also an effect gotten here called the Hamsa. Little trivia, this is actually an item that is meant to be a symbol of protection in regions like the Middle East and North Africa. What this item does is allow you to find hidden objects in areas designated by the Hamsa signal. I will say, this is used pretty decently throughout the whole game with puzzle solving. Quite a bit better than the rest of the sea level. There's also the creature on the dock that you need to give a fish to get past him. One thing I will say I do not like is the classic, what I like to call, point and click to go fuck yourself. This game has a lot of items, and with pretty much no character speaking, you usually only get a vague idea of what to give them or what to do. So it can get frustrating to a point when you don't know who to give what and just end up spamming items. I'm looking at you, Karst. Someday. The next section of the docks is more and yet less at the same time. It's a don't get detected area with minor puzzle solving elements and a pretty boring aesthetic. The area just feels so empty. Which I guess is the point, but it feels so basic and drawn out at the same time. Leaving the boring docks, we end up in a forest. And I want to stress how this area is almost identical to the previous dock, but it's leagues better. The wooded forest is ominous, with fog and obscured figures as the background sounds of the forest are calming and eerie at the same time. Dark figures loom in the fog, watching, and even though there's quite literally zero threat or gameplay, it's way better than the dock. The foggy forest then becomes clear as we hit a pretty creek that we pass through. It's all just ambience, but it's amazing. We can also find a creaking scary tree with a Hamsa symbol that transports us to a manor in a dark, dead forest. In front of it, a game cartridge, and as we walk away, we see a figure peeking from the window. I was actually really happy when I saw this because when I walked through the portal, I was like, oh, is this going to be an Ao-Oni area? And then nothing happened. But once you leave, you see the fucker's face. For those who don't know, Ao-Oni is one of those OGs of RPG Maker horror games that I might check out someday. Wow, 2 somedays, 2 paragraphs apart. I should not be making so many promises. The forest continues into a snowy hill, where we can find this eerie igloo that transports us to a next area. The beautiful, clear water reflecting the pink sunset and these white sand dunes are just beautiful. The soundtrack that accompanies it is beautifully serene with simple, low notes. I just want to sit here with the sand on my back, looking at the mountains with this song in my ears. It's incredible. Then we have these balloons that Matatsuki can use to get across these stretches of water, and this is what Yume Nikki is to me. Surreal and odd environments that have us explore and meander around them to soak in the scale and masterpieces of these dreams, even if they're dark. We can then find these giant cones, alone in the vast sunset sea with an entrance to another girl's room. The girl looks to acknowledge Matatsuki as she slams the door, looking as if she were hiding. The girl sits at her desk, writing or drawing. The room is pristine and clean compared to Matatsuki's, and the girl doesn't choose to interact with us, only concentrating more on her work if we try. In the original game, you had to flick the lights off and re-enter for a chance to summon someone different. In this game, it's the same, but when the lights are off, the painting in front of her goes crazy eyes and a mustache, with more eyes protruding from the carpet. Successfully summoning Muboa keeps the room dark as we get a horrifying face to jump scare us. Unlike in the first game where we are transferred to a different plane of existence, this signifies the end of our area. I'm going to be frankly honest. I really didn't enjoy walking around this level until the forest section. The blandness of the docks on a dark, empty ocean is a very interesting idea, but I feel like it, 1, dragged on too long, 2, got frustrating with a bit of lack in direction, and 3, it was far too samey. Reusing the same dock every time just got visually uninteresting, especially with having to go back and forth with the enemies. The lighthouse area, also in my opinion, was far too long of a section. One thing that I will rant on a lot later is about the parkour in this section. Parkour in this section was just not fun due to the ledge grabbing, which, trust me, I'll rant on more later, but that's what you need to know for now. The mall is an interesting area. It's not necessarily a bad area, but it suffers, in my opinion, from a kind of annoying puzzle design. Now, this game has had a lot of repeating areas that rely on a puzzle for its base floor plan. Cite the room full of beds if you need to find some girl in. For this main room, you need to solve a puzzle to trap this little thing. His name is Tokuto, and this little motherfucker was the bane of my existence for like a half hour. So what this little shit makes you do is chase him around and flick the levers of the escalators so that most are going down, meaning he can't use them for a fast escape. You need to end up cornering him and pushing him over to get a key to the next area, being the warehouse. The mall is also where you can find a flute room. This room is the same one as the original game where you can get the flute, and I'd say this is pretty well adapted. It's visually appealing, and I like how the flute mechanic is implemented. I will say, however, that when you use it for NPCs to talk to, they usually give you a melody to repeat back to them as a signal to use the flute. I like that, I just wish it had some more interactions, because while frustrating at first, it was kind of a neat mechanic. On to the warehouse. To say it simply, it's the lighthouse done right. This one is still not my favorite, but it is more engaging having the lights go out periodically and you need to keep out of reach of these mannequins. You can do this best with the help from the lamp and umbrella, but this area also checks the box of being way more visually appealing than the lighthouse too. This area adds parkour, altitude, threats, and interesting set dressing along with it. What I found to be a bit of a challenge because of the floaty controls. This area is literally just gray and boxes and metal beams and is more interesting than the lighthouse at sea. Amazing. I still felt great after beating it. It's just one of those moments where you get past a BS mechanic with your own banging your head against a wall for about a half hour. There's also secret spots like this one in a hall where you can find this maintenance hall of mannequins, which is really neat and gets you an important key for one of the next areas. Actually finishing the mannequin warehouse, you can find a line of many of them posed in mostly feminine positions, with a bed at the end for Matsutsuki to lay on, until we see a red flash of all of them looming over her. It's kind of like the Oboa jump scare from earlier, and definitely scared me on the first end. I'd actually say I kind of like this area, but it's so 50-50 for me. I didn't love them all, but I think it aesthetically looked kinda cool. I also really liked the mannequin warehouse, but the little nuisance of that tin can of blood pissed me off so much. Small side tangent, I have no idea why I hate these types of missions, but I have ever since Pokemon X and Y. I got stuck on that one fur fruit chase and didn't finish it for months. I don't know why, I haven't improved at them since. It is mostly personal, but I will admit it actually looks quite nice. And that little garbage can kinda looked cute. One of the last main areas is the school. The school gate is locked with windows bearing their empty panes upon you and the crying girl on the steps. This is Minoe, a crying girl whose day you can make worse with rain. In the school, you can find a lot of odd objects and odder characters that you can give them to. You need to find a few photo fragments to put together a picture of Minoe. She then fades away as we try to reach out to her, but refuse to move forward. We can then use a roof key to find a bed on the tops of the school roof and lay ourselves to sleep. The school is now dilapidated. Sky is blood red. You can do a bunch more puzzle solving, like with the sentient red blob that was actually pretty neat. But a lot of the other puzzles here have relatively basic implementation. I will say there was one cube puzzle to jump over things that really infuriated me, but that was just because of the janky movement regarding the double jump and ledge grab. This is where I want to go on to my movement rant, at least a mini one for right now. This section is largely exploration and puzzle based, and it's actually quite cool in comparison to the rest of the game. I really liked it, aesthetically, theme-wise, and puzzle-wise. Mostly. There was one puzzle that required you to double jump, and the movement was just not that smooth. And trying to grab a ledge or time it to make sure Matsutsuki was actually going to make it was so annoying with placement. This is also the area where you can get the lantern, and there are some interesting parkour spots relating to it specifically. You can eventually make your way to the other side of the school and find a closet room, which for some reason changes our camera orientation. And we can find a breathing zipper wall. Unzipping it is bloody for what had been a clean wall previously. Like opening a body bag into this long void hallway of darkness. Our camera slowly moves to Matsutsuki until we make our way to Minoe, where we see a red being patting her, and then it looks at us as it pats her faster. We drop to our knees and cry. The screen turns white, and a picture of Minoe flashes in our visions while we wake up. If we do it a second time, Minoe is gone, and we can run upstairs to find a bright, flashing epileptic nightmare. Don't worry, I'll only show a freeze frame of it. I'm sure that's all you need. Regardless, it wakes up Matsutsuki. I actually really liked these areas. All very dark, but aesthetic, and matches with these dreamy ideas. especially regarding trauma. This area has quite a lot of dark undertones, and its puzzles are admittedly pretty interesting, especially with these dark eye blobs that work out as our platforms and all the odd creatures we interacted with. The normal school setting has you finding a set of weird objects, but also the torn photograph segments. Why is it torn up? This forgotten and hidden memory causing Minoe to break down and flee from us. Personally, what intrigued me more was not Minoe, but Matatsuki watching her. Matatsuki cannot actually talk to Minoe, just chase after her, rain on her, and reach out to her as she disappears, but not actually do anything. I think we can make this similar to the blonde girl in the Cone Hermit Castle. Matatsuki doesn't reach out to these girls, and they try to tear away from her. I want to expand upon it a little bit in the analysis portion, but these are just some of my first thoughts. And now we have the locked apartments. These are plain and kind of dingy apartments that have the lights turned out on them. We can explore the rooms to find various oddities and collectibles. The scary industrial noises, thunder outside, and random scattering of cockroaches in some parts adds immensely to this eerie atmosphere. After finding a rusty key, we can enter the dark hallway, when suddenly, the lights turn on, and we're being stalked by another tall, dark, shadowy figure. Again, we enter a temple runner scenario where we need to dodge flying objects to escape the bastard. Running right, we need to parkour across a tornado of an environment. Broken earth floating with remnants of what some might say was a society. Objects are being thrown around in the winds as if Dorothy lost her way from Kansas, and god damn was that parkour annoying. Barring this, we can run to a door, escaping the figure, and lock ourselves in a room, curling into a fetal position while blocking it. After waking up, the room is messy, and she groggily walks over to the window still in the patio. Birds are chirping on a beautiful blue sky as Matatsuki looks down, and luckily, walks back inside. She walks back to the door and cautiously opens it to a bright white light that she walks into. There is another ending, however. If in one of the rooms in the apartments you found these 3 red symbols painted together on a wall in a room full of boxes, you could activate something on the roof. After being chased by the shadow monster, we can end up on the roof and jump over to the left of the generators to a bigger version of the symbol on the floor. And we're abducted. Abducted into a pristine white ship in space. A thin black figure plays a long piano of ivory keys in the main room, with a table behind her being reserved for 2 as she looks out into space. You can play a song with her on the flute as well and end up opening another room. A blank, empty room with a bed for Matatsuki to curl up into. Also triggering the credits, the piano lulls us to sleep. That was a brief summary of the game and gameplay as a whole. I will expand more on it later in the game analysis section, but just to say it quickly here, Now, Yume Nikki has been a mystery for over a decade, in fact, almost over 2 decades. It's a story people still debate and wonder what the original meant. I tried to find other videos taking a look at these games' stories, and found a lot on the original, but the response was more sparse to Dream Diary. The Doom Prophet has a video where he looked at the game as well, but looked at it more in comparison to Yume Nikki rather than its own game. His video is still nice if you're looking for more Dream Diary content. Using his theory to jump off of, he says that he thought this game was more of a reframing of the original. I'm not 100% sure I agree, but I think he has some good points. This game is hopeful. This story of Matatsuki is hopeful. The white door opening in the end having a Steam achievement link about how a new day has begun. Now, we're working from the end to the beginning, so let's flip it. Starting the game, we leave the convenience store. The streets are empty and a girl falls upon us. I think that most people have agreed that this is addressing the original ending of Yume Nikki, where Matatsuki jumps off her balcony. The interesting part to me, though, is what wasn't in the original game. First off, Matatsuki being outside. She's walking normally from a convenience store to her, what we can assume is her apartment. Another thing about this game that is different are the areas. Now that sounds like it would be obvious, but this game is in my mind pretty clearly half and half. Half new, half old. and half good, half bad, depending on how you want to see it. I played Yume Nikki on this channel quite a long time ago, and I don't think I uncovered every secret of the game. I know I didn't. But I'm pretty sure there wasn't an alleyway area. The sewers were a nice touch, but felt a little odd and out of place, especially for how I saw them used more as a spot you could jump to other areas, but that's besides the point. We're possibly getting more about Matatsuki's school life from the, well, school area. I think this also gives us more background on possible abuse or even Matatsuki's general past. First, the alleyway and apartments. These two far-off areas are linked by one main factor. Matatsuki is being followed by a threatening black figure with bright white eyes. Our only option is to run. No defending ourselves, no hiding, just running. She runs from the dark alleyway monster with eyes and shadowy figures watching for her and has to run into a slaughterhouse. I think this might be more symbolic than actually literal. We go from an alleyway with peering eyes to an enclosed box with a knife, where animals are quite literally brought as a trap to kill them. Then we have the adjacent room of a monster, who has a giant mouth on its stomach. Honestly, my symbolism can only get so far with this one. After leaving that room, we find someone bound in the street with a straitjacket, as these odd creatures watch from afar above, as if they're high and mighty, and above all what's happening below them. Matatsuki kills the defenseless creature only for it to turn into another person on this dark, dingy road. In the school, we also have the girl, Manoe, who is crying, and we just end up pushing her away and literally throwing water at her. The picture has her next to sinks, where she cries upstairs as well. I have two small theories there. One where Matatsuki is a bully, and the other having her being an observer. I'll admit the bully idea is a bit more flaky, but I think it adds another perspective of potential. Matatsuki needs to throw rain on her, and then take a torn-up photograph of her crying just to shove it in her face when she's crying again. Granted, the bully theory doesn't have as much credence as the observer idea. She's trying to reach out, but she's unable to, and only able to watch as her friend recluses into abuse and loneliness. She is alone. Crying on the steps of the school, she's alone. Crying in the empty, blocked-off top floor. And when we see her after opening a zipper into a bleeding wound that had been hidden, we find her crying again, being comforted by a creepy, tall figure. I also use that word, comforted, loosely. On the second go-around, she's gone, but the figure continues to watch. The mall section also gives another piece of symbolism that is similarly dark, with the mannequins standing there as if they're idols. They stand there waiting for Matatsuki to go to sleep and become defenseless. And then they lunge and attack. Another aspect of this is how people are displayed. These mannequins are faceless. The people in the alley are shadows at best, and the creepy cloaked eyes are boring down into her. There are also the white figures who lull along with slow steps and holes for heads. I also want to draw attention to the hermit castle of the blonde girl, Poniko. She specifically ignores Matatsuki. Not runs away from, not pushes away, ignores. Poniko is either upset with, disgusted by, or just indifferent to us. But when we turn off the lights, there are eyes and faces in her room. She's just as paranoid as us. Now, I want to talk about the endings because opening up the Aztec symbolism of the desert is a can of worms on its own that I will leave to all of you. I urge you, comment your theories and let's discuss them. But back to the endings. The secret ending is the most interesting too, with how Matatsuki gets abducted. Now, it's hard to specifically say what that is, but the achievement talks about how the dream goes on. Now, it's still not 100% clear to me what this exactly is, but I have a few different ideas. First, the obvious, Matatsuki is still enslaved to her dreams, refusing to go outside and still living as a recluse out of fear. This one has some fair credence to me because of how the ending feels. Matatsuki doesn't want to go outside and face her fears. She wants to stay out in space, protected, in a safe white room away from all others. Kinda reminds me of A Silent Voice. An anime movie where the MC was a bully and has an issue where he has trouble looking people in the eyes and recognizing them because he blocks their faces out. Kind of like how Matsutsuki doesn't like to imagine all these people's faces, making them random colors, blank, or holes. I also think that there's a second idea. She may be in a hospital. I vaguely remember one video I was watching thinking about the clean and white environment with the space aesthetic representing being far away from society, aligning with a mental hospital. Which I would say is fair considering the little I know about how institutions like that are considered in Japan, which is what we all assume this takes place in. The other ending, however, gives us a light of hope for Matsutsuki, to face her fears after running so much. She looks over the ledge into which the first game ended, but chooses life instead. It's kind of beautiful, but also a little scary. We don't know what happened to Matsutsuki to stick her in her room. What would drive someone to such a fear? Is it safe or even a good idea to go back outside? Well, that's Matsutsuki's choice. But it makes me still wonder who made her get stuck in that room. With that, I want to get into this game as a whole. First off, I want to say that I love Yume Nikki, the original game and the company Playism that has brought up so many of these IPs of indie games are just trying to do both justice to the property and maximize their profits. But man, this game is so weird. I don't mean that as in, oh, what the hell is all this weird stuff in the game? No, I mean weird as in, it's so inconsistent with why I do and do not like it. First off, obviously, the game is too different to compare apples to apples with the original, but it exemplifies problems I saw in the 3D Awry game. Now, I have not bought nor played the 3D Awry game. I have only seen it in a Ben Again video. But from what he described about the graphics and controls, I think it's reasonable to assess that the games are similar in quality. But let's go in order. First, the soundtrack. You can't really mess that up. I'm pretty sure 90% of it is also just recycled or readjusted Yume Nikki songs, and never really felt like the music or ambience was bad. On the contrary, I thought it was quite good for most of the areas. Another thing I like is the concept art and collecting of effects. Now, I didn't mention much about it, but the main way to check your completion percent is through collecting artwork of characters and their concept art. It's actually really neat, and this game is a glorified art book. I'm gonna be honest, it's good art. But yeah, my other gripe is with how some things just feel wrong. The beautiful snowy forest is way nicer than the mile of plank you had to walk to get there, where it's just a bunch of these wooden boards across the water. The level design was boring and interesting at the same time, but I think boring largely had to do with Matsutsuki's movement. In this game, most of the areas are side-scrolling platforms with the exception of a few barely free roam areas. However, Matsutsuki's movement is so slow and a little cumbersome, especially when you need to jump or grab onto ledges. They're just not fun to deal with. Even in the walkthrough I was using to get through the game, the guy died multiple times on the final floating island parkour segment. As did I. Then there's the general areas. Why are they so separate from each other? Some feel like they were designed so well with a bit of care and attention put to them, and then other areas feel like the devs got a bit lazy and were like, fuck it, this should work. I know I'm being pretty critical on the game, more than usual, but it's just so confusing to me how some of the basic features of this game are just not as good. I don't like the 3D model for Matsutsuki. The controls are annoying. The game is wildly inconsistent in quality, so I don't recommend it, right? Well, that's the thing. For 20 bucks, hell no. I don't really recommend this game for the full price. But it does go down on sale pretty often, and I've seen it get to like $4. And for a few hour experience that honestly doesn't really compare to its free 20-year-old sister, it's alright. I can't for certain say I enjoyed my time with the game, as I found multiple parts of it infuriating, as I've made clear in the earlier sections. Areas like the sewers are pretty minimally impactful, but look way better than some of the more prominent areas. I love Yume Nikki, but I don't think I can bring myself to like Dream Diary as much. Yes, I know the irony saying it that way, but it just feels like there's less of Yume Nikki in this game. I don't want to say this game is soulless. Feels like it, but I don't want to believe it's a shell of a game with some oversight from the original creator. It's just not as good as the original. It's fine, it's serviceable, and a fan of the series can find it entertaining. But it's just not great. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed going on a trip down a game that I wish was better. Anyway, if you want to join the Discord server, it's in the description, where we hold polls and I try to liven up the place with starting investigations. Comments, criticism, and suggestions are always welcome. It's been me, Moosh. See you later. Arrivederci.